What happened to the transfer window? We had Mesut Ozil joining Arsenal out of nowhere on deadline day, to Antonio Rudiger starring in one of the worst announcements ever.
No problem, I'm a Chelsea player now.
It used to be such a fun time, but nowadays due to journalists, PSR, social media, we need to take a look at the death of the transfer window. We'll start with journalists, and I think there's one we're all thinking about: Fabrizio Romano. He's probably the most successful transfer journalist to ever live. Look, regardless of what we think about him, that man puts in graft. His screen time must be over 20 hours a day. But the only issue with this, we know absolutely everything. Nothing is ever a surprise anymore. The guy has nearly 26 million Twitter followers, and if there's a main transfer, you can guarantee it'll be on his timeline. It's unfortunate because we're in the era of the best transfer announcements we've ever seen. I mean, to be honest, you could just do a compilation of all Burnley's videos. It feels like all of the teams are trying to outdo each other. And I'm all for it. Look, football is kind of like a reality TV show. It is entertainment. Sometimes the chase and the saga of a transfer is actually more exciting than watching the player play on the pitch. I have nothing wrong with journalists keeping you involved with the day-to-day business of these transfer deals because it is quite interesting. However, I do think it should be a rule that the club gets to break the transfer announcement. Could you imagine in 2021 if Manchester United broke the news that Cristiano Ronaldo was rejoining them? You know, if they did a video of just panning up and you're seeing the number 7 shirt, but instead what you get is a photoshopped image from Fabrizio Romano just telling you he's gone back to the club. He's not the only one, but we'll just keep on Fabrizio because he's the biggest one, isn't he? They earn the living off being the first one to break the news. I mean, look at the Rashford news to Barcelona. At the time of recording, this had 61 million impressions and over 500k likes. I don't know how much people earn off Twitter. However, I can guarantee he's earning a shed loads from these tweets, and he'll be doing 100 a day. So I completely understand why he does it, but it just doesn't leave anything to the imagination anymore. Someone like David Ornstein as well. He's probably the best in the UK. I mean, you could argue Fabrizio goes in and out of some transfer gossip, where it feels if Ornstein is tweeting something, then it is going to happen. But there's no longer the excitement of a player randomly joining a club. I remember, and this is a completely random one, but I remember when Danny Ings joined Aston Villa a few years back, and it was huge because it just came out of nowhere. There were no leaks, there was no rumours, it just said Danny Ings has joined Aston Villa. That's it. And I'm not trying to say this was always the case because we've always had gossip, haven't we? However, I just do feel that we get told absolutely everything and there's no more surprises. Thing is, we could argue about this all day long. People might like Romano. I like a lot of the transfer gossip that I get. However, one thing you can't argue, deadline day. Social media and this transfer business on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, it killed deadline day. It became huge in the 2010s. I mean, you'd put a day aside to watch it. You'd be sat around the TV all day just keeping the loop of all the moves going on. And it was so good because it was so suspenseful. I felt like they had a journalist outside most Premier League teams and a lot of championship clubs just to try and catch a glimpse of someone in a blacked out Mercedes coming through the training ground. I was so invested in the Peter Odemwingie saga. I mean, imagine nowadays a player travelling to the other team's training ground thinking that he's signing for them and then the deal breaks down. Or Harry Redknapp, a Premier League, a top 6 manager, leaning out of his car window and giving the journalist updates. Unfortunately, this has been robbed, and I'm not saying it's a malicious attempt from Fabrizio or David Ornstein, but their success on social media has essentially killed deadline day, because what is the point in watching a TV show for 10 hours when you can just flick on your phone and get the news instantly? And to be honest, if you are watching deadline day, a lot of them are just reporting what these journalists are telling you on Twitter. So essentially they're the middleman. It has taken away the emotion a bit because you tell me whatever team you support. Everton fans, for example, Jack Grealish recently moved to Everton. You've seen a tweet and I bet you're buzzing when you see that he's confirmed. However, if you're watching transfer deadline day like Arsenal fans were when Mesut Ozil moved, you're absolutely buzzing. It's like you've scored a 90th minute winner. Seeing the big yellow banner at the bottom saying breaking news, seeing Jim White report on it, seeing all the other journalists tell you exactly what's going on. You can't beat that on social media because you're just reading it. And on the other hand, Leeds fans getting told that they need to stay watching the TV programme because they have more business coming, for it only to be Dominic Polion getting sold to Oldham. It just gets your emotion going, and unfortunately, it's not the same anymore. And it never will be the same again because we live in a different world than we did in 10-15 years ago. I think it also used to give a sense of community to the football clubs because, especially at the start of deadline day, a lot of fans would gather around the journalist to see if they are signing Mesut Ozil, like I say. Fans might be outside Cobham training ground or Carrington or Melwood for Liverpool, and they'd be all waiting for that journalist to tell them the news. Whereas nowadays, I don't think they do as much. Because like I say, you got it on your phone. What's the point in making the journey down there when you can just find out in 10 seconds? I think deadline day has also suffered because football is just more and more professional. Every year it's getting more and more corporate and more polished. So you're not going to get these rough and ready images that you saw on deadline day. We all know the one that I'm talking about with the journalist and a certain object. Sky would never let that happen nowadays because we all find it funny, but there'll be a boring parent who rings up and says this is inappropriate. It's also clubs. Clubs are just PR machines. I mean, imagine Harry Redknapp doing what he did today. The marketing team would have an absolute meltdown. Whereas it actually connects these managers and these players to the fans. And like I say, it brings that community feeling. Plus nowadays, it does feel like managers don't really have much influence with transfers. Unless they're a high profile manager, it's the sporting director, it's the board within the club that are making these decisions. It'd feel weird if a sporting director rolled down his window and started talking to the fans, because it would feel more like a club statement instead of a quick show of emotion from the manager. I think the death of transfer deadline day has just kind of coincided with the death of humbleness in football. There was still a bit of innocence to deadline day in the late 2000s and 2010s. Look, of course Mesut Ozil was signing a contract for 10 million plus a year. He got signed for 40 million, so it's not like someone traded some chickens and goats for him. It's a massive multi-million pound deal. However, even if we're wrong, it kind of felt like Arsene Wenger was probably on the phone to Jose Mourinho organising the deal. But nowadays, with more and more transfer committees and sporting directors getting involved, it just feels like a business agreement rather than a silly moment like David De Gea's Real Madrid move breaking down because of a dodgy fax machine. In more of a financial sense, PSR has kind of ruined the transfer window, or at least dampened it. Or, on the flip side, did Neymar's transfer in 2017 ruin the transfer window? I mean, you tell me, because I'd argue both of these events have been massive with football transfers. And I suppose the transfer of Neymar kind of caused PSR, or was a big influence on it to be implemented. So Neymar was bought for 220 million in 2017, we all know it. He moved from Barcelona to PSG, and then the steam train happened. Harry Maguire went for 80 million, then Bellingham and Coutinho went for 100 plus million. Van Dijk went for 75 million. At the time, Van Dijk was not valued at 75 million. It was because Neymar inflated these prices. It's even like Pepe, remember that, going to Arsenal for 72 million. The fella had like one good season in the French league, and then Arsenal paid 72 million for him. This was the start of the end, because the best players in the world were no longer the most expensive players in the world. For the most part, the highest transfer fees were for the best players in the world. But after Neymar, it just completely, like, no value mattered at all on a player. I also think it harmed a lot of players. Look at Jack Grealish, João Felix, Coutinho. All of these players were bought for far too much money, which led to huge expectations. I mean, especially Coutinho, because he was the direct replacement from that Neymar money. But it's like, take João Felix. Yes, he won the Golden Boy. He had played one full season at Benfica. Then he was bought for around 113 million. I mean, just think about that. It's absolutely ridiculous. The poor lad has never lived it down. He was Atletico Madrid's best player in 2022. And that's a good achievement for a club like that. But in most people's minds, he's an absolute flop. And I think that caused his career to kind of become derailed, because he was never going to live up to that price tag. Look at Ousmane Dembele. He's arguably the favourite for the Ballon d'Or, but he was bought for about 100 million euros after playing 2 full seasons in top-flight football. He's only just reaching his potential now. But because of the Neymar money, it killed his Barcelona career before he ever stepped foot in the Nou Camp. But I suppose the modern issue is PSR. Like I say, I'm happy that spending is becoming more, it's slowing down since that Neymar incident. And I'm happy that teams are trying to become more sustainable. But the issue is, and we all know the clubs that I'm going to say, Aston Villa and Newcastle, they're getting forced to sell their players. And this is, we've seen it for years. Big clubs take smaller clubs as players. I have no sympathy for it because unless you are Real Madrid, everyone has the place in the food chain. Look, a team like Newcastle, they need to understand they can't buy Mbappe, they can't buy Vinicius Jr. or Pele's hologram from the 1962 World Cup. But there's definitely a middle ground, isn't there? Because it's not fair that Chelsea get to sell their own hotels and women's football team to themselves, essentially, to get around these rules. Because other teams don't have the luxury of doing that. Newcastle were forced to sell Elliot Anderson, a player who they've developed since 2010, just so they're within the rules. So I can completely understand how Newcastle fans can be put out by these new rules, because it doesn't seem fair at all. I mean, imagine if Roma had to sell Francisco Totti in the 2000s to get around FIFA fair play because he was a pure profit player. It just completely kills this homegrown feeling for a lot of these clubs unless they're in the quote-unquote top 6, because Newcastle, they can't have a Lewis Miley if he becomes a world-class player because they'll just have to get rid of him. You know what this is all done? And just let me rant for a second. It's made us all discuss financial issues in football, and that it's ridiculous. Imagine nowadays a little kid's talking about PSR in the playground. If you go to the pub, people are talking about like pure profit and financial fair play and getting around these rules. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. People will go on about nostalgia. No one used to speak about this back in the day. 100% not. You didn't used to speak about a sporting director. I didn't know what sporting directors are around in the late 2000s. I had no idea, and I was obsessed with football. But nowadays, I bet if you asked loads of teenage lads who the sporting director of the club was, they would know. And I just think that has taken the soul and the humbleness away from football, because we shouldn't be discussing net spend. I mean, it was kind of like the Coutinho thing created this net spend discussion. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And this is one of the reasons why the transfer window is dying, because we're all going back and forth about Newcastle if they can afford to let go of Isaac, Liverpool if they can sell these players, if they can get around this PSR issue, Arsenal if they can sell the women's team to themselves. I mean, all of these issues are just ridiculous, and it is definitely one of the reasons why it's taken away the enjoyment out of the transfer window. I think my point is the innocence is just being removed. It's like I say, sporting directors, they're getting treated like rock stars nowadays. Richard Hughes has done a brilliant job at Liverpool getting all these players in, but we didn't used to speak about sporting directors in the same way we do now. And I just find it a bit odd. That is my opinion. But let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of the transfer window. I still enjoy a lot of it, the social media aspect. Yes, it is kind of taken away the excitement from it, you know, those random transfers that you just never saw coming. However, it is also really handy when you get all the updates, and it also helps you to know what transfers are just going around Europe. But like I say, I do think the transfer window is dying, and it is becoming more and more, I don't know, just like a business meeting, where it used to be fun. It used to be like a reality TV show that you could see all these different players going everywhere. Ashley Cole meeting with Jose Mourinho behind closed doors. Nowadays, it's not even news anymore. But like I say, leave a comment below, tell me what you think. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, and if you subscribe to the channel, that'd be great. But thanks for watching.